All right, so this workshop is going to be about using some Google Cloud APIs to perform some functionality that would otherwise be very, very difficult to have and pretty much impossible without, outsourcing it to a different company. So we're going to be walking you through how to use some of these APIs, kind of what the APIs generally do, setting up an account, everything you need to get going with some Google Cloud APIs. So first of all, why use an API? I touched on this a bit already, but basically APIs allow us to use functionality beyond what we can code ourselves. So for Google Cloud, in particular in this workshop, we're going to be using some APIs for translation, for image recognition, for text-to-speech. And these are, active areas of computer science research that are constantly improving and also require a lot of technical background to even implement in many ways. So just think about how difficult it would be to come up with a good translation service on its own. And then not only are we going to be using translation, but we're also using text-to-speech and we're using image recognition. So it's incredibly powerful to be able to leverage these APIs instead of having to write our own code to do something very, very difficult. We also just make our application much simpler. All we have to do is this one API call instead of having to actually implement the application itself. We can rely on an external service. And an advantage of an external service for especially Google is that they have a lot more compute power than we would on our own machine. So we can keep the processes on our own machine or on whatever we're hosting pretty light and instead just rely on Google servers to handle these kinds of requests for us. And lastly, APIs are just everywhere in general. You're going to be using an API very, very often in your work, and so it's always a good idea to get more practice with APIs. The translation API, I'm sure everyone is familiar with Google Translate. Basically, all we do is feed text in one language to text in, to the API, and then it will return text in the target language that we're trying to translate. So overall, pretty simple. Basically works how you would expect it to with, being familiar with Google Translate or something like that. Now we have the image recognition API. So what we do here is we pass it an image, and it's going to recognize text that's present within that image, and then it will return that text to us. Again, pretty similar. If you've ever used something like, it's pretty dated at this point, but like Google Glasses did this. I think Google Lens now does this as well. I'm sure there's some other functionality that I'm not aware of in apps that do this, but this is also a very common thing at this point. And lastly, we have the text-to-speech API. Again, pretty, expected in terms of functionality here. What we're going to do is pass in the text of whatever we want to be read out. And then this API is actually going to return to us like a byte type format of the audio file, which will then convert into an actual playable format like an MP3.
Hello everyone, my name is Amy, and I'm going to walk you through how to create a Google Cloud account and also enable the APIs that we would need to use today. So before we start, make sure you have either a Google Cloud account already created or a card beside you, because we would need that card information when we're creating the account. Okay, so starting off from our GitHub account page, so here we see our README, and most of the things are pretty straightforward and we can just follow the things. So let's open up our Colab notebook as our main tutorial page. Here, you see the first step is setting up the Google Cloud project, which I'm going to show you right now. So if we open up cloud.google.com, you can just search and that would be the first one that would going to pop up, but I already have it open here. So log in to the account that you want to put your project under, and we can see the first page gave us this get started for free. So let's take that option and create our Google Cloud account. Okay, so country, pick the one that you are, and I'm currently in the US, so I'm gonna just do United States. I have not tried other countries. It might be or might not be different. So if you choose another country, you're gonna figure it out. Okay. This is our school address. So I'm just gonna put it there. Okay. And phone number, since it's optional, I'm not gonna put it there. And here's where we need to add our credit card information. So I'm not gonna put my card information here. When we resume, you're gonna see me already click it on a free trial. Okay, so now I have just pushed that button, and now we're getting started. Okay, so now we're at the Google Cloud homepage, and we see up here my first project, meaning that it has already created a project for us. So if we count back to our tutorial, you can see that basically I've already got this account created in this project I created. So next thing we're gonna do is to get the credentials. As it says, visit the API console. So API console is just here API services go to dashboard, and we see our API services and other information around it. And we click on enable APIs and services. So for our tutorial, the ones we're gonna need is Google Translate, Cloud Vision, and text to speech. You can just type and search and click on enable. It might take a few seconds. And then we'll just go as our next one. Go to our Cloud Vision API. And same thing here, do enable. And the last one we need is text to speech. To speech. So text to speech allows us to pronunciate, to have the machine pronunciate for us whatever we have already in text, and speech to text is the other way around, so it recognizes what sound that is. Okay, so let's come back to our dashboard. And now, as we see here, we need credentials. And we do create credentials API key. And now we already have our API key. You can just simply copy it. And we can go back to our notebook now. If we run this column, this is basically the get path is just a library so that you are putting it as a one-time input instead of having it like hard-coded it onto the notebook so that other people can see it. But basically, it just means we are getting this API key and storing it in this variable API key. Okay, now let's get to the exciting part, our actual example. So what we want to do today is that we want to imagine that you're traveling to a foreign country, and you are seeing a sign that is in that language that you don't actually know, and you want this machine to help you understand what is on there. And we can do that by simply associating inputs and outputs from the APIs that we just said we're going to use. So let's first try how do we actually do an API call. Here, if you follow this link, it will bring you to the documentation. Luckily, most of the API's documentations look exactly the same. They all have these sections of quick start, how-to guides, samples, which are like more complicated projects that you can take as a reference. But for our sake today, we're going to go directly to APIs and references, where we would see how to use the API. So for Google Cloud APIs, most of the APIs have both a language client available and also like a REST API, like a web call. So we're using the REST API for today because this way we can handle all the credentials by just using one API key, which I think that's probably the easiest way to do. So here, we need to first create a translation endpoint, which is the service here. So we from the library import a build, and we use the build to build a translate API using our API key. So we store it in our service here, which is the endpoint where we're going to make our API calls. So our inputs, it's contain 3 elements of the things that we want to translate, and our output is simply we're calling the list function, which is the operations list. So in here, we simply state that our source is in English and we want our target to be, for example, French. And our query is that the inputs that we have here, and we just simply execute it. So the best point about Google Cloud APIs is that it's actually run in the virtual machines, not on your local computer. So it wouldn't be really calculation intensive. And since we're also using Google Colab, which is also using distributed resources, like it literally just have no burden on my computer. So to unpack the information we got, we break it apart into input and output and print it out. So basically, all the indexing and all the names you can find in the documentation guide. I'm not going to walk through it too in detail, but this is where you can find it. So we can see that we printed out in format of input and output, and someone of French can tell me if this is actually correct. From my perspective, this is just like, wow. Okay, so they not only have like English, French, those common languages, it's also the library is actually really huge, and almost all the languages that we have on Earth is available here. So you would only need to search. You can just do a Google search for what is the language symbol for this language. For example, English is EN, French is FR. You can basically find all the other languages that way as well. So we do a simple run. We run it in sequence and we got those results as expected. It's very fast. Okay. So now let's get into our real business of the version that I talked about. So we can break it into 2 parts. First of all, we want to use computer vision to recognize an image and know what words are on that image. And then we want to translate into a language that we know, in this case, English. So to invoke Vision API, it's very similar to what we talked about cloud translation. So you simply go to the documentation page, which would give you information. Just like I said, they look exactly identical, so you know where to find the stuff you're looking for. And similar here, we found an image online. This is just a random signing Chinese, and we build our vision service. This is just a random name, but you need a service for your API calls. So, and we do the annotate function, which again, it's what you can find in API and references very easily in a REST API reference. you can find here annotate. It's like the go-to option. You can also do async analyze. Then the syntax would be a little bit different, but you can figure it out from the documentation. This is our request body. So image source, most of them is very straightforward, and you can find an example in the documentation as well. And then we get the response and break the response apart into the actual description. You can run it here, and this gives us the expected. You can see that the characters, even if you don't know in Chinese, this looks almost identical to the words on the side. And it definitely works better with like typed words rather than handwritten words. But I've tried before and it still kind of works. Okay, so the Vision API not only tells us what that words are, but also it tells us what language is that in. So we can see here, the language code is actually stored in response, the first item of response, text annotation, and here. So this way it tells us is ZH, which represents Chinese. And now we know that it's in Chinese, we can run it through the translator and let the translator tell us what it actually means. So here, again, we created this list to put it through the list operation, which is exactly the same as our previous example. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. And we can simply see the results being clear and protect, sanitation to create a beautiful water environment. We probably know this is not the best translation, but at least it gave us an idea of what it's about. Okay, and I'm gonna hand it off to Tim to continue this workshop. Thank you.
So just playing around with the Vision API a little more, we've got a sign just in English, so we don't actually have to do any translation. It's kind of tricky to read as well, right? Because we've got kind of these different fonts, different background colors. This is kind of slanted. These numbers are as well a little tricky to read. You got this like decal here. So not the easiest sign to read, and we're just going to kind of play around with it, see how well the Google API performs on this. So we've got our same, URI here, still creating that same service as well, giving it the image URI, right, that we've defined above. Still want to do that same text detection, only 5 results, and fire off the request just as we did before. And so we're getting the actual text from what it detected, and let's see what that is, right? We've got route roadside attraction, so, pretty good. 99, okay, it missed that, fair enough. And then 1932 Standard Oil gas station, Odell, Illinois. This restoration is a project of, yada, yada, yada. So actually looks pretty good, right? Like down here, it kind of got everything. I don't really know what this TV is about. Maybe there's a hidden TV that I can't see, but the Google API is a lot smarter than me. But it did overall pretty well on the sign, right? So that in itself is very impressive. So now we're going to play around with our last API, and that's going to be the text-to-speech API. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with this. Pretty much just take a block of text and have that read out to you. This is used all over the place. Google Maps, right? You get the directions from that. If you ever watch like live streams, people use this for that reason as well. For disability access on websites, you can have like screen readers that do this as well. So really important functionality. Functionality has been around for a while as well, and should be pretty familiar to everyone. So first off, we're going to install PyDub here, and then we're going to import audio segment. This is basically just allowing us to actually play the audio that we get at the end. It's not really necessary to use the API itself, but to actually see the results of what we passed in, we're going to need this library. And then besides that, we're doing similar things as we've done in the past. We're getting this text-to-speech API, building out that service with the same API key that we've got before. And then our request is going to be a text request with the input of the text that we've defined up here. with the road sign. And we've got the English US version, right, for our language code, so that controls who's actually narrating this text. And then we are telling it that our audio encoding should be an MP3. It actually returns, right, we see after we execute this, a base 64 encoded string. But this still represents the MP3 file type, so then when we run our conversions back, it will allow us to actually play an MP3. So you can see, right, that's what I've done here. Base 64, decode that raw audio. This will give us just the raw bytes of everything. And then I open up this audio.mp3 file, writing bytes and creating the file. Just write those bytes in, and we have our song that I'm creating as well from that file that I just wrote all those bytes to. So that's how it knows that it's an MP3, and it can actually convert this into something that's playable. So let's see how this sounds.
Route Roadside Attraction 991932 Standard Oil Gas Station, Odell, Illinois. This restoration is a project of the Route 66 Association of Illinois Preservation Committee. Identified November 9, 1997 on the National Register of Historic Places. TV.
So again, we have that TV at the end, right? But that's just a part of our text, so nothing to be worried about there. And yeah, overall, I mean, sounds great. Pretty much read off the text seamlessly. Pretty, standard voice. So if you wanted to extend this a little, you could try some other languages, with different language codes. You could try even different voices are possible, for the same language code. So we could use an English speaker from the US, but they would, not sound exactly like this guy here. So yeah, thanks for coming to the workshop, and appreciate you coming out to VHII in general.